Hello there and welcome to another Coffee with Colm, and thank you for joining me. This week I want to tell you why I say that I love business and I hate work. All right, I love business and I hate work, and I'm sure you're wondering how can you say those two things, because they sort of contradict each other, because in fact as you can probably imagine, building business takes a lot of work. But let me explain the difference, if I may. I started my career, wanted to be a school teacher back in 1980 when I left school, but I didn't put the work in. I didn't really have a plan except I wanted to be a school teacher, and the only reason I wanted to be a school teacher was because of the short hours and the long holidays, so it wasn't really much of a plan. Anyway, I didn't put the work in, didn't get the honour in Irish, didn't get into teacher training college, and stumbled into a job in a restaurant, which has led me to a very fruitful career over the last almost 40 years now in the catering sphere. And but I'll tell you what I learned around 1993. In 1980 it was very exciting. If you enjoy something, you get good at it. If you get good at something, you typically get on in it, and that's what happened to me. I enjoyed the catering industry, I enjoyed hospitality, I enjoyed people, and I got good at it, and when I got good at it, I got on in it. It led to a great career. One of the highlights was managing Bewley's of Grafton Street for 4 years in the early 90s, and then I became the franchise manager for the Bewley's Cafe brand for a number of years before I took on my own Bewley's Cafe franchise in Limerick. And what had changed in those intervening years, in 1980 it was all very exciting and very new, and I had a few bob in my pocket, and life was good, no responsibility. Roll on 13 years to when I was 30. In 1993, and all of a sudden I realised that because of my lack of planning, because of my lack of foresight, I suppose, I had really just positioned myself to work hard in a job for the rest of my life, to work hard for somebody else in a job for the rest of my life. And I felt that something needed to change, and I came across a saying somewhere: for things to change, things must change. So I began to study, and I began to study the principles of business. I began to ask myself the question, how come some people get ahead and a lot of people don't? And one of the books that I stumbled across in those years was a book called The Cash Flow Quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki, and it was transformational in terms of my thinking. And in it, Robert Kiyosaki alluded to the four characters or the four players in the world of commerce, or in the play. There's an ongoing, eternal play going on at a global level called commerce. And despite all the millions of jobs that are out there, and the thousands of business ideas that inhabit the planet, despite all of that, there are really only four characters in the play called commerce. And the first character is the employee, and the second character is the self-employed individual, the third character is the business owner, and the fourth character is the investor. And I found it really interesting to learn that there was more than just one view of the world. The view of the world that I had learned growing up was you come out of school, you get a job, and you pay your bills, and away you go. But I learned that there are in fact four players in the world of commerce, and I also learned that you can choose which of those players you want to be, and that you can in fact be one or more of those players at any given time. So let me explain. So if you can imagine that the entire world of commerce is in fact one giant system, well then the four characters, the four players in the world of commerce interact with that system in different ways. They all play different roles, require different skill sets. And the first player in the system is the employee, and the employee works for the system. And the self-employed individual is the system. The business owner owns or controls the system, and the investor funds the system. So that's how the four players interact with the system of commerce. And although the four characters play different roles and they all interact with the system in a different way, it doesn't mean that you and I are locked into one particular character or one particular role for the rest of our lives. In fact, we can play multiple roles at the same time. So for example, I could be an employee of the system somewhere, and then in my spare time I could be self-employed. I could be the system somewhere else. I could be an employee of McDonald's, for example, getting paid an hourly rate. At the same time, I could be self-employed as a DJ at weekends. I could be an investor at the same time, investing in stocks and shares, or indeed in property. And I could perhaps own a coffee shop on the side, own a small business on the side. So they're not mutually exclusive. The four players in the world of business can in fact play multiple roles, and all simultaneously. So let me talk about the four players now in terms of two distinct sets. Player one and player two, the employee and the self-employed, they go out and they work for money. They do the work, and in doing the work, they earn their few bob. So the player one, the employee, trades his time for money in a job situation, works for an hour, gets paid for an hour, works for a week, gets paid for a week. The self-employed goes out and trades his time for money. He does the job, gets paid for the job. Doesn't necessarily get paid for time, but gets paid for a job well done. So if we look at the other set, we look at player three and player four. Player three is the business owner. Player three owns or controls the system, and player four funds or invests in the system. Well, effectively, player three and player four, they own the work. They've put their time and effort into building a business system, creating a business system within which the work is done, and they get paid whether they go to work or not. If we take Michael O'Leary, for example, or Richard Branson, I think it's a fair assumption, I think you'll agree with me, it's a fair assumption that whether they get up and go to work on Monday morning or not, they will get paid. Fair assumption for sure. Okay, the pilot or the cabin crew in either of their airlines, or the baggage handler in their airlines, associated with their airlines, if they don't get up and go to work on Monday, they won't get paid. I think you'd agree with that. So that's the fundamental difference between work and business. Work is player one, player two. Business is player three, player four. And you and I have got to decide which of the four players we want to concentrate and put our time and effort into. Essentially, player one and player two will work ad infinitum to earn their few bob, and that's absolutely fine. Player three and player four will work equally as hard, perhaps even harder, truthfully, even harder, at least in those early days, to put a business system together that will continue whether they get up and go to the office or not. And that just happens to excite me. So that's why I say I love business and I hate work. I love business. I love putting time and effort into something that has repeat value. I really don't like putting time and effort into something that I must repeat ad infinitum. Millions of people do. That's absolutely fine. I was one of those for many years. I just learned that there's another way of looking at the world. In fact, there are many other ways of looking at the world. Player one and player two in the play of commerce will trade their time for money ad infinitum, and that's absolutely fine so long as they know what they're doing and so long as it's a conscious decision they make. Player three and player four will put time and effort into building a system that will continue to produce once they stop working, and that's what excites me. Player one and player two, in my opinion, is work. Player three and player four is business. I love business and I hate work. And the question I want to leave with you this week is, what part do you play in this global play called commerce? Are you an employee or self-employed or a business owner or investor? Are you a hybrid of all four? You've got to decide. You've got to figure out where you are now. And more importantly, I think you've got to figure out where you would like to be in the future. I speak to people about getting clear on their 2020 vision. And to keep it simple, it's how do you want your life to look on your birthday in 2020? It's only a few years away. How do you want your life to look on your birthday in 2020? What part do you play today? Is that the part you want to be playing in 2020 and beyond? If so, great. Stick with it. Get even better at it. If it's not the part that you want to play in 2020, well then, for things to change, things must change. So you must do something differently. And I wish you well. I want you to consider, what part do you play? Employee, self-employed, business owner, investor. Employee and self-employed is work. Business owner, investor, in my opinion, is business. What part do you want to play? And thank you for joining me for this week's Coffee with Colm. I hope and trust that you got something from it. If you've enjoyed it, you think somebody else would benefit, I'd be delighted if you'd pass the link on. If you've enjoyed it and it's your first time here and you'd like more of this type of stuff, well then go to the homepage, ColmO'BrienMotivation.com. Leave me some details there and I'll make sure you get a link like this every week. Consider what's been shared here today and apply it into your thinking for this next week. And remember, for things to change, things must change. So if change is necessary, make a few. And then equally as importantly, please come back next week and we'll share another coffee together and I'll ruminate on some other aspect of life and business. In the meantime, get some good coffee if you can, get some fresh air if you can. If you spend a lot of time alone during the week, I recommend you spend some time meeting people this weekend. If you spend a lot of time with people, I recommend you spend a little time alone. Be good for you. When the time is right, and only when the time is right, then get your head back in the game, get organised for the week ahead, get stuck in, make next week count, and I'll see you here this time next week. Sláinte. I love great coffee. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.